I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus I was evil. Take things and break things and Jesus I was evil. I never shook baby.
Drink so that you don't get demonetized.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that YouTube goes after you for that.
Maybe.
No.
Unsavory characters like, myself.
Exactly.
We're a family brand. We don't want that guy associated with our product.
Right, exactly.
It is.
So yeah, dude. David Krae, welcome back to the show. It's been a while. It was like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago since the last time you were on.
Maybe longer. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's a blur. It's the COVID blur.
Yeah, exactly.
We're all foggy.
So Ben's not here because he's a trader. He's a backstabbing trader, and so he's not welcome on the show. No, I'm kidding. No, he's on his honeymoon. He's actually in Italy right now. So he's doing
Nice.
he's exploring a lot of fun cultural stuff there. So I'm sure when he's back, we'll be talking a lot about that.
Well, congratulations to him and his lovely bride. So
yeah.
So
I thought this would be a good time to bring on some buddies. So yeah, dude, welcome back. And so you and I are both lovers of LA, and even though I'm sure we have plenty of gripes,
we're lovers of LA. We're not lovers. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But I'm sure we probably have plenty of gripes with LA. But we both have a lot of fun stories. You especially have a lot of fun, interesting stories about LA and Hollywood. So yeah. So I thought you want to kick things off, talking a little bit about how you first got into LA and the entertainment industry and all that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, I guess we should start off with the fact that I'm not from California, and I'm not even from the United States of America. I'm Canadian.
Sorry to hear that.
Right? It's an affliction. It actually it's an affliction many in Hollywood have.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for that is, I mean, Toronto. People have heard of Toronto Film Festival, and they know that movies and TV shows get made in Canada, get shot up there.
Yeah.
But for a long time, and a lot of people maybe don't know this, but for decades and decades, Canada was considered part of the domestic marketplace, North American domestic marketplace for film and television. So there used to be a lot of sort of back and forth, a lot of reciprocation between the Canadian art actor and director and filmmaker scene and the Hollywood scene. And then 9/11 happened, and a wall went up with immigration, and it got a lot harder to cross the border, and then kind of a division happened. But part of that is that, like, there's a deal in place. It benefits Hollywood, benefits America, because I think like 98% of movie tickets sold in English Canada. We're gonna, like, not including Quebec because they're French and they do their own thing.
Right.
But not like some massive amount, like almost like 90s percentage of movie tickets sold in Canada are for Hollywood films. Right. So Canadian moviegoers' money is coming out of their pockets and going to Hollywood. So Canadians are basically, from the film and TV standpoint, in terms of economically, especially in the movie side, but also in a lot of Canadian television, it's carrying, Hollywood-made programs.
Right.
Are all the consumer money and all that revenue that's going to Hollywood and to the American TV networks. So in return, Canadians were always kind of sort of unofficially welcome to come down for pilot season, to be part of Hollywood. They would shoot movies in Canada. It's all been very friendly. Now, there's also been some politics about that. Oh, these runaway productions. I think people remember that back in the 90s and 2000s, complaining about, oh, they're stealing our jobs. And,
Right.
I'm like, well, so anyway, back to the story. So I started off working in film, both as an actor and as a filmmaker, working crew. Like, I was a lowly production assistant in Toronto, working on like independent films and Hollywood movies when they would come to town. Back in the, dare I say, the late 90s. Like, one of my first movies I worked on as a production assistant was there was this Mark Wahlberg movie called The Big Hit. It was, I think, one of his first movies where he was the lead. It was with Bokeem Woodbine, Lou Diamond Phillips, Christina Applegate, a bunch
Oh
of
wow.
yeah, and of course I like to complain a little bit about Mark Wahlberg on the internet sometimes because he was kind of a jerk to me, you know,
Yeah.
on the movie. And I remember that, and I've always looked forward to like my career blowing up so that I could, you know, show up and be overly nice to him and
Right.
remind him of what a jerk he was.
Yeah.
But you know, his career's gone through the roof, and mine's still, you know.
Well, you know,
But that's okay.
I do sympathize though, just because like I've been to Wahlburgers. Have you ever been to his restaurant chain? So
No,
he has
I try to avoid anything with his name on it.
good. Well, so and because like I went to Wahlburgers,
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's still around, but he made this burger chain just to capitalize on the name Wahlburgers, and it was a burger joint. And I went once, and it was
burgers any
fine.
good?
It's
Yeah.
fine. It's just a regular sit down, you know, like casual restaurant, casual dining restaurant with that serves burgers, and the burgers were fine. But I remember being so bothered by it because, you know, it's like, you know, because you know he's got those brothers, but it's like 90% of the posters of the movie posters are just Mark Wahlberg movies, and then like a few of his brothers. But
Any with his Calvins, any of his old ads with his Calvins.
yeah. And so,
Yeah.
but they did this annoying thing where
Yeah.
it's like, you know, here's a Wahlburger, and there's the double Wahlburger, and then bacon Wahlburger, and then instead of saying like with cheddar cheese, it says with government cheese, because I don't know if it's like a Boston thing or like it's meant to make it sound blue collar and down to earth, but every burger it was like, you know, $18 or whatever. So it's like
government cheese is a thing though.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't it like that like
you're on welfare or if you're
yeah,
on,
there was it was like some sketchy crappy cheese that the government would give people, if I remember correct. Like, so maybe that's their like low budget burger. I'm surprised they don't have a Harvey Wahlburger, you know.
I know exactly, yeah.
But
that pissed me out because like the burger was fine, but it was like, and this is the last time I was probably 8 or 9 years ago, so it was expensive. It was $18 or $19 back then.
Wow.
And just being like, cool, you're putting government cheese on it just to make it sound cool and down to earth. No, I'm not going back to this place. So anyway, I'm just letting you know I sympathize with your. I've been wronged by a Wahlberg too. So
there you go. Right, it was the Wahlburger that got you.
Exactly.
But no, I mean, you know, working in film, it's a lot of it's high stress, and everybody's pushing hard to get things done during the day, and some people get yelled at, some people get treated, you know, a little roughly if they screw things up.
Sure.
You know, if you mess up, right, someone might yell at you. Like that was normal in the film crew world. I mean, I know today people don't like that sort of thing, but when you've done nothing, when you just literally are walking into a room to try to like assist people and help them, and if someone just comes and starts like reaming you out because they're trying to impress some girls.
Yeah.
Because that's what was really going on there. He was being the tough guy to try to, like, you know, and I think he actually got a girlfriend out of the deal. So, hey, unofficial wingman, you're welcome, Mark Wahlberg.
You know, at the very least, thank you. Like, hey, dude, I'm sorry for doing that, but you got me a date, so
right. So he owes me one.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I worked for a number of years in crew, like learning filmmaking from the production side, and auditioning for being a bit, because Toronto, if mostly the major parts have been cast for productions that come to town. Right. So they're really just casting the bit players up there, a lot of the sort of supporting roles. So if you're a young actor in Toronto or Vancouver or somewhere in Canada, you're not going out for the leads. So you audition, you get little roles, and people just said, look, I was told, like, hey, if you could gain like 30 pounds and so you could look more like the buddy, right, then you might get more work in Canada. But you should go to LA because that's where they cast the leads, and you have more of like a leading kind of thing. And my head didn't really understand that, because I grew up in a small mining town where it was the toothless hockey players who got all the girls where I grew up. So
right.
So I didn't know the concept of that. But anyway, so back in So one of the movies I worked on in the late 90s, I guess it was summer of 97, sometime around the same year, maybe.
Mhm.
I had been up for a job to be the assistant to an actor on this movie, and I had worked on this independent film that winter, the previous winter, like volunteering on an indie film, because that's kind of how you got in. You volunteered, and this other guy that I'd worked with as he was a PA as well, production assistant. He had worked like an extra week longer than I had, like,
Mhm.
as like free on this
Right.
indie film.
Right.
So they gave it to him instead,
Ah.
which was great because he got so the job that I missed out on, this other guy got, was to be the assistant to Matt Damon on Good Will Hunting,
Oh.
right?
Oh, man.
Right, and like, what a great job! Like, his job was to like hang around with Matt, show him a good time, maybe take his laundry to the cleaners, but like,
Yeah.
so of course I met Matt when they were out renting movies one night, and we
Mm.
we hung out a little bit. I didn't hang out with them, but like, dude was like, oh, hey, what, come on over here, like, because I knew the guy who was his assistant.
Yeah.
Again, I didn't tell him that in fact that guy had my job,
Uh,
but no, it was his job. He earned it. He did that. He did one more tour of duty than I did in the indie
right.
films.
Sure.
So he deserved that nice cushy plum job of being Matt Damon's buddy for 10 weeks, and getting paid for it.
Yeah.
But so I met him, and he was really in a good mood because like his dreams were coming true, right? Like he was making Good Will Hunting. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
like,
Yeah. We all know how that
boom.
turned out. So.
Yeah, he's done all right. So, but I remember it kind of made an impression on me. I thought, you know what, this is a guy, he wrote a script, and he's an actor, and he launched his career with that, and I was like, well, I write. I mean, I had also been doing prior to that, I did college theater, and when I was a student, I founded this program for original playwrights, like student playwrights, to like, because previously they were only doing like known theater, like Shakespeare or some Tom Stoppard stuff, or famous stuff. And
Yeah.
I was like, can't we have young student types write short plays and put them on, like, so it was called the workshop plays program. So I was really heavily involved in theater while I was a student. I was supposed to be doing pre-law, and I was kind of cutting class and doing theater and sneaking off campus to work on film sets.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I met Matt, and I was like, this guy's doing what I want to do. So I kept working, and I kept writing, and in 2002, I want to say, yeah, I went down to no. Okay, so this brings me back to what we were talking about earlier, going from Canada to Hollywood. So you were welcome. Most Canadian young actors would go down to LA for pilot season. Right. So you go down when they were auditioning for TV pilots, and you'd hope to get cast in a pilot. And if you did, they would give you a visa so you could stay. As a Canadian, typically you can be in America for 6 months, less a day, without a visa. As a business traveler or a tourist, whatever. But after 6 months, you have to leave, right? So as long as you have money, you're not starving, you're not trying to, but in those days, you were welcome to come down and audition for pilot season. Except my timing was poor because 9/11 had just happened, and being 2002, just after 9/11, all of a sudden they were like, no visas for anyone. Like, I met some of the great casting directors now, like April Webster, who was doing Alias at the time. She's like, you could be like, you do accents, you speak a couple languages, you could play one of like some European bad guy. I could cast you in all kinds of things. She's like, but the executives have told us no more visas, no more, not right now. Just don't ask. Things are not good. I mean, it was just post 9/11, right? So things were not good.
Yeah.
People were nervous, people were scared, and
Canada was the obvious enemy, right? Yeah.
Yes. Right. So so my time in LA, so I came down with a stack of movie scripts that I'd written, and I didn't know anybody. I mean, I knew 2 people in Los Angeles. I had a distant cousin who lived there, and I had this friend that I had gone. I was an undergrad with a few years earlier. She was doing graduate studies and singing opera or something. And other than that, it was I knew nobody. It's just some scruffy foreigner from the northern wastelands of Canada, and showed up to try to open some doors. And yeah, 2002 was like the worst time to do that. But you know, you that's life. You play the cards you're dealt. And yeah, and so oh yeah, previously I had been doing the actor waiter thing, you know, waiting tables, bartending to try to, and then I got sick of that, and so I had started a web design company back in like 1999, 2000, and because back then you could just learn how to do HTML, and if you could do Photoshop and figure it out, you could build websites. And we did all right. We ended up being a contractor for Saatchi and Saatchi advertising, and did like Toyota national campaigns and like all kinds of. So I'd made a little bit of money.
Yeah.
So I came down. I remember when I crossed the border, they're like, "Where?" My car was full to the rafters, right? And they're like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "Just down to visit some friends." They're like, "Sure, buddy." I'm like, they're like, "What's with the actors pick photos?" And you know, because they searched me, right? They searched my car, and
right.
like, okay, and I was like, they're like, "Do you have any money?" I was like, "I have all these credit cards," and and they were just like, "Okay, whatever, have fun in Hollywood, kid," you know. Yeah. So off I went, and yeah, you know, showed up and got a place, rented a little apartment down in right across from Westchester High School down in Playa, Westchester area, if you know where that is. Like Lincoln and Manchester, almost down by the airport. But and that was interesting. I rented the upper floor of this condo. This woman, her name was Polly, and she was this old lady who was not well. She had two little Bichon dogs, those little, you know, little Bichon Frise dogs.
Right.
April and Andy were their names, and she was living on the main floor, and she had like a hospital bed that she lived in. She was terminally ill with cancer.
Oh wow.
And so she was renting out her top floor because she couldn't climb the stairs very well, and she needed to supplement her self financially, so she took a tenant.
Yeah,
that turned out to be me. So and you know, and the deal was that I would pay some rent, and then I would also pick up her groceries for her and do all the things she couldn't do because she wasn't very mobile.
Right.
Like one time we took her out to, she really wanted to go to IHOP, so she got the oxygen tank and all this, and I took her out to, you know. Yeah. So she was pretty much housebound at that point. But Polly, she was quite the character. She was an old Connecticut socialite, I guess, who had been brought out to Hollywood on an MGM contract, like they did back in the day, right?
Yeah.
And she had some stories, and yeah, you know, she did, I think, a couple of years under contract and never went anywhere. You know, she's like, "Oh, they sent me out. You know, they were trying to groom me. They put me in acting lessons, and you know, all this stuff in the old studio system, right? Where they would groom somebody, and we're going to teach you how to walk and how to talk and how to you know, be a movie star." Right. And she's like, "Yeah, you know, they sent me out on like one of those celebrity dates, you know, where they're trying to, like, they call the paparazzi to come in, and her date was Paul Newman. Nobody knew who he was yet. He was like a unknown. Right. And she's like, "Oh yeah, and he had the worst skin. That's all we talked about. We talked about how they had him using these astringents to clear up his acne." Like she, and her roommate was why am I blanking on her name? Mel Brooks' wife. Mrs. Robinson.
Yeah.
Anne
Bancroft?
Yes, Anne Bancroft. So I guess her and Anne were roommates.
Oh, wow.
And she was like, "Oh yeah, and she was out there pounding the pavement all the time. She worked hard. She went out there going for auditions and trying to meet the casting people. She was relentless." And I was like, well, obviously she got a career out of being relentless. So yeah. Anyway, Polly had some fun stories. She used to date like the big band leaders, you know, like Artie Shaw and those guys. Like And but so she married a producer, a writer producer, eventually. This guy named Leonard Kaufman, Leonard B. Kaufman, and I remember one time, Polly, she hollered at me from this, so blah, blah, blah. She's like, and she said, I always hear you banging away on your computer upstairs. I had a little laptop, well, a little laptop back, then they were big fat laptops.
Yeah.
Big clunky things. But she's like, what are you working on up there? And I was like, well, I'm writing screenplays, And she's like, could I read one of those? I'm really bored, stuck in this bed.
Yeah.
And so I gave her a couple, and she read a couple of them, and she liked them. And she says, my ex-husband, he used to be a big shot down at Warner's.
Yeah.
I could give him a call if you want, right? And I was like, heck yeah, right?
Yeah.
That would be great. She's like, well, the last time I told him about somebody, it was some guitar player that I thought was cool, and it was a total disaster. It didn't work out. So don't embarrass me, And so Paulie gave Leonard a call, and because Leonard would visit every once in a while, but not a lot. I mean, he had remarried, and interestingly enough, he had remarried Artie Shaw's ex-wife.
Oh.
So everybody knows everybody. It's like high school. And Doris Dowling, one of the Dowling sisters, who were known for, I guess she had done some movies with Orson Welles or something. But these are all names that would have been known back in the 40s and 50s, I guess.
Right.
So Leonard popped by one time, shortly thereafter, and nice to meet you. Polly tells me you're a writer and an actor, and I was like, yeah. He said, well, I'll read some of your stuff if you want. I can't make any promises, but he joked. He said, most of the people I know in Hollywood are dead, but if it's any good, maybe I can make a few calls. And I'm very thankful and grateful, and so anyway, Leonard read a couple scripts of mine. He came back. He said, you know what, I really like this. I think you got something here, and so he introduced me to his literary agent. So that's how I got literary representation. At the time, it was Lou Weitzman, a preferred artist. They're up in Encino, and but Lou was semi slowing down at the time. I mean, so this was kind of became a theme for me. I was meeting all these great people who were no longer really in the biz. They were kind of on their way out, and so it didn't really help in terms of like opening a lot of doors for me.
Yeah.
But or propelling my career forward. But they had a lot to teach. They had a lot of wisdom, a lot of really interesting stories to tell.
Yeah.
I mean, so Polly told me this. Leonard didn't tell me, but and then eventually Leonard knew that I knew. But so his best friends in LA, in Hollywood, were like, it was Leonard would hang out with Shelley Winters, Errol Flynn, and Cary Grant and Leonard. Like, there was like a group of four of them. They hung out. They were pals.
Yeah.
And Paulie was like, oh, Leonard was such a cheapskate. He wouldn't, if it wasn't for that Errol, I would never have any jewelry. He knew how to treat a lady, right? So he was just, but no, like, so Len and I became friends, and real nice man. Again, he's like, I can't make any promises. Like, most of the people I know are dead, but he called up this guy at William Morris at the time, named Jeff Robin, who was I think the head of legal. And so I got a meeting at William Morris, which was really cool. I guess, what are they called now? WME Endeavor or something, or I don't know, WME. I haven't been keeping track lately of who's called what, but back then it was the William Morris agency, and they were a big deal. So I got a meeting there, which was cool. So Jeff Robin, I met with him first, and he says, I hope you know who opened the door for you. I said, well, I know Leonard called you. And he said, well, yeah, but do you know who Leonard Kaufman is? I was like, well, he's a producer, a writer. He did Leonard did shows like Private Benjamin, Daktari. I believe he was involved in the Dukes of Hazzard series for a while.
Hawaii Five-0.
Hawaii Five-0. Yeah. So he did a lot of good shows, but he's like, he did those, but people don't know this, but Leonard was Hollywood's unofficial script doctor for like 30 years.
Oh, wow.
If you had an issue with your script, movie script, TV script, whatever, you took it to Leonard, he'd fix it. He was like the known fixer, and he did it without credit for like. So you look at his IMDb, there's not a lot there because by the time the internet happened, he was well in his 80s.
Yeah.
Right. His career was over. So a lot of the records of what he did isn't available to the internet generation. They don't know about it. So this Jeff Robin was like, yeah, he's like Leonard got me my start at Paramount when he was at Paramount back in the day. Like, so like, no, we owe him a lot. So that's why we're meeting with you, because Leonard asked us to. And he said,
quick, wasn't Carrie Fisher kind of like that for a while too? Like, wasn't she kind of like a pretty big script doctor in Hollywood? And
people like, she didn't do it for credit, but everybody in the biz knew.
Yeah.
Because she was quite a good writer. So so my meeting with Jeff Robin led to the next person he walked me to the door was a guy by the name of Cassian Elwes, Carrie Elwes' brother, who Cassian was a big agent at William Morris, did a lot of packaging of major film projects, and that was a very humbling experience, let me tell you.
Yeah,
because I'd done a few little, and I worked crew in Canada. I'd done a few little bit roles on some Canadian television shows, like just and he was just like, "Hello, blah blah blah. You're nobody," right? Like he was like, I'll read your scripts, and I think he came back to me and said, it's pretty good. The problem is we're William Morris and you're nobody.
Right.
So you have more you need to go do more stuff before you can come hang out work with us, right? You need to go build your career a little more, little nobody. Which is very humbling, right? Like man, I've been working my ass off for years, and I thought like you finally get an agent, and they're the ones who know how to get you in and open the doors, and they're like, nah, yeah, but there's 100 of you in Hollywood, right? And why should we, and you're a bigger pain in the ass because you are Canadian and it's 2002 and getting visas for you is going to be a pain in the butt. So why should we go out of our way when, next, hi, Mike, hi, Steve, somebody else is going to walk in the door with a better face and a bigger stack of screenplays, and they're from, Alabama, and they don't need a work visa. Right. So anyway, so that was an interesting time. So LA you hit a few walls, but while I was there, I thought, I'm here. It's costing me money. And the Canadian dollar was really, really crappy at the time. I think it was like 67 cents to the US dollar. So every dollar I spent was costing me like $1.30 or something. I don't know. I can't do the math now, but so it was very expensive for me to be there. And I thought, while I'm here, I'm going to try to do some more studying. And so I started I took more acting classes in LA. Took stage combat, sword fighting classes. Cool. Bobby Lento up in the Valley. I took tap dancing and ballet. Studied ballet at the West Side School in Santa Monica, and ended up dating my ballet instructor, and we dated for a little while, and then it didn't work out, but we stayed very good friends. Sort of one of my favorite people in the world. But that was interesting. You go into a ballet class and you're like, you've never done. I mean, what the town I grew up in was like the town from Footloose, right? Right. You guys don't dance. You don't dance now, right? If you dance, you go like everybody's out of the bar or the party at some club or whatever. And the DJ's spinning up the tracks and all the girls are dancing. It's the guys that go out on the dance floor, like they walk out the door and there's like 10 guys going, "Hey, Twinkle Toes," and you're like, "Oh crap." It's not. Yeah. So I thought, well, as a performer, I need to conquer this fear. And it wasn't even a fear of dance; it was fear of getting my ass kicked. You're just looking over your shoulder. It's really hard to like let go and bust a move when you're we're looking over your shoulder. In the good old days, so yeah, so I took. And I remember like people like took ballet, and I was like, Arnold Schwarzenegger studied ballet. There's pictures on the internet of Arnold doing ballet,
Yeah.
because it's great for movement. It's good. Uh, it's great exercise.
Well, I played football in high school, and I remember my football coach recommending us to take ballet, and he goes, especially the bigger guys,
Right?
like linemen, because I mean, like, yeah, you guys have all this bulk and you're strong, but you also need to be light on your feet, and you need to develop stamina.
Yep.
You need to be limber. And so all of those things can give you an edge. If it's just two big guys hitting each other, it's like the guy who's a little bit better on his feet is going to have more of an edge.
Right.
I don't think any of us. I certainly didn't. I don't think anybody else did, because I also went kind of to kind of a ghetto school. So I think it was just like anybody doing ballet when you're in high school at this ghetto high school. It's like, nah, that's not going to happen, too.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, it's even in a tough masculine sport like football, it's still like it's highly recommended that you learn how to get light on your feet. So
Yeah. Well, ballet will teach you poise,
yeah,
and boy, does it ever teach you endurance. You try jumping up and down for 45
Mm.
minutes straight.
yeah,
Right. And especially when you have a taskmaster of a ballet instructor. And I'll tell you, she was a real taskmaster of a ballet instructor.
yeah.
And yeah, the day I left, because when I had to go back to Canada, the last class, she made me jump up and down for 45 minutes straight. And the whole ride home to Canada, my calves were just screaming at me the whole time.
Yeah.
But my first, so I started there, and they said, well, you don't know what you're doing. You're how old? And you're like, and they're like, all right, you're going to shadow this person. You're going to stand behind there's this person, and you're going to do everything they do. So they're doing all the little with their feet, the little tendus and the plies and the little, all those little ballet things they do. And because you don't know any of this stuff, because you've never taken ballet.
Yeah.
You grew up as a cishet male in small town wherever, right? So you weren't out there in the ballet class. There was no Billy Elliot kind of scenario happening for you. So I was shadowing this young woman who was very attractive and very fit, and she really was very good and had wonderful technique and moves. And she was a TV actress who was transitioning into film, turns out. And her name was Jessica Biel. So there's another Hollywood adventure. So I was shadowing Jessica Biel in ballet class.
Oh, nice.
And yeah. And so and she's a real doll. I mean, I haven't talked to her in forever. But she was real fun, and we hung out. So the girlfriend, the ballet instructor girlfriend, was friends with her, and so we got together with her and her boyfriend at the time, who was a young actor starting out in his career. He'd done a few things, but wasn't really known yet. So he was a guy by the name of Chris Evans.
Oh,
and, right?
Yeah.
So we had dinner with them one time, and he was real nice. He's funny. I remember when I saw him in the Avengers movie playing Steve Rogers. I was like, he's playing himself.
Yeah.
I mean, that's him. He's just like a total bro, super nice guy, right? Like regular dude. I'm like what? Like perfect casting, right? Like, play like a good old nice guy, with upstanding, and like that was his vibe. That was totally his vibe. So, and I mean, he's branched out as an actor since then, but
sure.
But yeah, so that was kind of neat, right? Like, I mean, I've never really been starstruck by anybody. I'd already worked in the biz for a number of years in crew and as a bit actor, and so of course you're working with big name actors all the time.
Yeah, and
they're just people, right? But for the sake of this Hollywood Adventures conversation, I mean, I met some interesting people along the way, and most of them are nice. Most of them were just regular people doing a job and trying to make it in the world. And so we hung out with them a little bit, and what else happened on that trip? Because that was 6 months. Let's say, so before I went to LA, I knew this casting director in Toronto. There was this he was very gay casting director.
Nice.
And he would always be like, I was like one of his little pet actors that he'd take a shine to, and he's like, oh, you're going down to Los Angeles. He's like, let me call some of my people. Right. So when I got to LA, I was kind of adopted by I like to say I was adopted by the gay mafia in LA. As their little straight boy, their little token straight boy.
Yeah.
And they were always like, are you sure you're straight? And so I've had to really examine that, especially that then as a young actor, like, why do all the gay people keep asking me if I'm sure? I'm like, they know something I don't, right? Especially when you're young and impressionable. So anyway, they were really great too, and they invited me out to various social events, and because when you're there by yourself, you don't know anybody, right? Especially then, like there wasn't like. This was 2002. Like there wasn't any social media. There's like you had email, but when you left, right, like all your friends, when you left town, all of a sudden it was like you no longer existed. It was weird, and you're like, I'm just a phone call or an email away. Why is nobody? Well, because you're not there. They can't call you up and say, hey, let's go for beers on Friday. Right. So you no longer exist. And then, so like for instance, like they invited me out to this birthday party in Venice one time. They were like, oh, come out. It's going to be a great time. It's this big party. And it was like Hillary Duff's 16th birthday party.
Oh, wow.
Right. and I'm like, and I didn't even know who she was, right? Because she was that much younger. And I think, what was her show?
Lizzie McGuire?
Was she Lizzie McGuire? Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, she was some kid, right? And, I remember thinking she looks, she had that straight hair back then, anyway, so I was like, okay, and one of the group of friends, there were a bunch of people. There was this one guy. He was from Georgia. He was a drag queen from Georgia. He self-styled Southern Sissy, as he called himself. He was really cool, really fun guy. And then there was this other guy who, I'm trying to remember how that came about, but he was like, so explain to me what you're doing here. And I was like, well, I'm an actor, writer, trying to meet people and make my way in Hollywood. And he's like, nobody ever just comes right out and says that. I was like, okay, like that's why I'm here, right? It's not a big secret. And he's like, you know what? And he's like, how do you live though? I was like, well, I can't work in the United States. I don't have a visa. I can be here for 6 months as a tourist or for business travel. So I consider this to be business travel. I'm here for meetings. Yeah. And if one of them turns into something, then then there's potential for employment. But he's like, so all right, leave that with me. So then like I got a call from the guy, like, and I had gotten a cell phone, right? And this I had a cell phone, a local cell phone, because let me tell you, using my Canadian cell phone in the United States at the time cost $2.60 a minute back then.
Oh shit.
So it's not good. And I wasn't like, I had made some money doing those advertising websites, but not a lot of money. Like I wasn't rolling in the dough. So anyway, he's like, I may have a job for you where they would pay you cash. And I'm like, gray area here. Like, because I don't want to break any rules. I don't want to, run afoul of, well, back then it would have been the INS, right? The immigration. And, but he's like, so I was like, well, what's the job, right? And what's the deal? And he's like, well, you would go to all these red carpet events in Hollywood and parties and movie premieres, and we would pay you to go to them. I'm like, what? Okay, yeah. You pay me to go, yeah, and you're gonna meet all the important people in Hollywood. You meet all the stars, all the actors and directors, and I'm like, and you want to pay me? Yeah, about $200 a night to go to these things. And I was like, what's the catch, right? It's like, right. This sounds like a job, like this is like a dream come true for somebody trying to make connections in Hollywood. Yeah. So it would.
Well, you got to jack them off. So,
right, right, yeah. How's your wrist strength? Yeah. No, so I would be going. There were these two reporters. I'm going to call them reporters. Rick and Stephanie. And you would go as Rick's buddy or Stephanie's date to these events. And I was like, that's it? Yeah. And I'm like, what do I need to do? I need to do anything? No. You just be yourself, because you're talkative and friendly, and people open up, and you seem to have this knack of getting people talking and chatting them up and whatever. Because I guess, I don't know. And the same thing, the same thing had happened when I'd worked. I spent some time away from the arts briefly in the late '90s. I worked overseas in Eastern Europe. I'm like doing like a government job, and I kind of made a lot of inroads there because I would just talk to people. And those people turned out to be like ambassadors and dignitaries and foreign leaders, and people were like, how are you meeting these people? I was like, I just talked to them. They were standing around drinking wine, and I went up and said, hey man, you got a light? And they're like, yeah, but who does that? I'm like, why are you? Is everyone socially afraid to talk to other people? I don't know. Maybe I'm just a social butterfly. But anyway, Rick and Stephanie worked for the National Enquirer. They were gossip reporters, right? And so what I would do is I would be their buddy, or Stephanie's date, or Rick's buddy, and I'd be the distraction. I'd be like, while they're snooping, I was like, and when I heard the National Enquirer, I was like, and maybe, I don't know how well known that is now, like, but back then, like, they were known for being like the gossip rag,
Right. I think TMZ has really kind of taken over that racket, but yeah.
So I was like, do I have to snoop? I don't want to be a snoop, right? I don't want to snoop on actors, because that would really piss everyone off, right? I don't want to be like, my name would be mud in Hollywood if they were like, you're the guy that snooped my private stuff ended up in the newspaper, in the tabloids.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, you just be yourself. Like, Rick and Stephanie, they're there to work. You're there to be, just to like make you're their arm cannon. I'm like, basically, I was like going to be an escort for some gossip reporters, tabloid reporters. So I was intrigued. Again, it was gray area. I wasn't sure about this whole like making money, and I was like, is it just a tip? Am I making tips? Because I'm not really employed. So they said, look, just go down and meet with the guy. Because I thought, well, maybe if it's more formal, then maybe they'll set me up with a visa and I could stay, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have a formal offer of employment, then now you're legit and you're doing proper immigration and all that. Yeah. That was more appealing to me. Because I kind of like, I know a lot of people from, like to jump the border and try to make it in America without dotting the I's and crossing the T's. But
yeah,
I've always tried to dot the I's and cross the T's, and as much as I can. And they said, well, you got to go down and meet the editor, Jerry, down at the head office. So I went down a couple days later to Santa Monica to the National Enquirer office, which is a company called American Media Inc.
Oh, right.
And they did the Enquirer, the Sun, the Post. All the tabloids were published by the same company.
Yep.
And anyway, and they said, bring your resume.
Were the offices, were they pretty nice? Were they kind of like, I just imagine them very like seedy, like maybe like,
right? You would think so, right? They're totally normal. They're so normal. Like, you would think you walked into an insurance company or a law office or just like an ad agency. It was not like seedy. Everybody was normal. Everybody like had normal clothes. It was actually very bright and cheery. They had cubicles just like every other office everywhere.
Yeah.
Except their filing cabinets were full of files about Michael Jackson and and other celebrities, and so it was. So I took my resume and I handed it to this guy, Jerry. What was his name? Last name? Anyway, he was the editor of the Enquirer at the time, and I guess he got confused by my resume, because my resume wasn't like a normal actor resume that you would expect. Like, I waited tables at the this bar in Minnesota, and I took these acting classes.
Mm.
Mine had like, I worked for this law firm, I worked for the government embassy overseas, I did all this stuff, right? And I had actually already worked as a journalist, a columnist, you know, as I was a youth journalist when I was younger, and had all this education stuff, and so he was like, you know, he interviewed me and started asking me all these questions that had absolutely nothing to do with Rick and Stephanie.
Yeah.
And
Was this Jerry George, by the way?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. Okay.
And he was like, "This is great. Come with me." And he took me into the next room, and there was like this reporter guy, Steve. I can't remember the guy's name. We'll call him Steve. He's like, "You're gonna shadow Steve for the next week. Here's a desk for you. Is this a vacant desk? Yeah, you can have this desk. Here's a computer and a phone. We'll get you some business cards, and we'll get you working." Sorry, I have a Labrador Retriever here.
Oh.
Hey, what's up, buddy? And I was like, all right, great. All right. You work with Steve. All right. See you later. And I was like, how do I explain to this guy that's like, you got the wrong guy.
Right.
And I was doing all like the polite Canadian thing. Like, how do I, okay, sure. Yes. You know, like, so I ended up like at this desk, and they were like, all right, here's some parking passes for the week. These are temporary passes. Just use those, get in and out of the parking garage. So, you know, and like, we'll see you tomorrow. And, you know, so I spent like a whole week, training, to be a tabloid reporter with the National Enquirer and the Sun and the Star. Anyway, or the Globe. Anyway, like, they were like, go in the file room, familiarize yourself with all of our files, right? So literally I'm reading all of their files.
Right.
I'm a spy.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm in their offices, and I'm reading about, like, you know, all the Michael Jackson dirt, like everything they collected on everybody. They had all these files, that stories that they hadn't published yet because they weren't ready, or they didn't have enough, or it wasn't solid, it was too flimsy for them.
Right.
Because that's the thing, like, as much as they were a tabloid, they still had to have some basis in fact.
Yeah.
And so, you know, so yeah. And I remember, oh, I shouldn't tell this story.
Oh.
So the phone would ring, right? They had me answering the phone, right? Like, all right, you filled phone calls coming, because celebrities and or their management or their publicists would sometimes call with dirt that they would give to the tabloids, because you know, there's no, you know, they want their name, like some actor hadn't been in a movie in a while and their name hadn't been talked about in the press. Well, let's have a little scandal, shall we? Or let's leak something. And so that they're all of a sudden their face is out there at every grocery checkout line.
Right.
And now everybody remembers them. And then 2 weeks later, the movie studio producers, executives are going to be calling, going, "Yeah, I saw you in the grocery line. Yeah, I want you in my next movie." You know, like,
that's
it's
so
all
funny. That's so that it worked like that, because it seemed like for the longest time it was the exact opposite, at least like during like the studio system, because they had fixers back then where it's like, oh, like, you know, like this, you know, this big star that we have is, you know, got busted in a prostitution ring or is like gambling. So we need to send someone out to make sure that story does not go out. But
right.
now,
Well,
like,
they still did that for like their, obviously, I guess if they would have still done that for like really, really salacious stuff.
Yeah.
But for like only slightly salacious stuff, this was like by the 90s, 2000s, right? Like, sex was a little more acceptable, right? You know, like, if so and so had an affair, well, you didn't lose your whole career over that anymore. You're like, all of a sudden you were interesting, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. It was like that weird point between you lost your career, you had an affair, so you were immoral. And then in the 90s, 2000s, and early 2010s, now you were just a regular person. It humanized you because we're all imperfect and life is hard and relationships are harder. And then now you had an affair, you must be a womanizing chauvinist pig, and you need to be canceled. So, you know, there was a period where you wouldn't lose your whole livelihood and career for screwing up your marriage. And it made for good gossip. And so sometimes someone would just plant it there. And sometimes celebrities, like, this is the story I wasn't going to tell, and I'm not going to tell it, but I will give like the broad strokes. There was an very well-known movie actress, had put out a book talking about her life and her personal life, and her ex-husband did not like some of the things she said in the book, so he called up the National Enquirer and had a whole lot of things to say about his ex-wife, which he told to me, and I was like, I was like, yes, sir. He's like, are you getting this down? I was like, yes,
Yeah,
I'm like pretending he was, he was angry. You could tell he was just venting and irrational and angry, and so I just said, yes, I'm getting it all. I didn't write any of it down. I just, in one ear and out the other, I just promptly forgot it. But like if I mentioned the names of the people, like you'd be like, these are big A-list people.
Right.
And I figured this is my good deed of the day, to just forget I ever heard any of this crap, because this is somebody's personal life and it doesn't belong. But yeah, calls like that would come in, right? And some of it was intentional, and some of it was just people lashing out, people angry and wanting to hurt their ex, because that's divorce. People get crazy sometimes. So there was my good deed. Anyway, after about a week, I finally figured out. I got up the sort of courage or whatever I was kind of sheepishly said, "Hey Jerry, we need to talk." I was here for the other job, the one with Rick and Stephanie, to go to the parties. And he's like, what? I was like, I wasn't supposed to be. And he was like, get out of the building, right? Like, I was like, no, man, I'm risk. Is that still? No, just leave. You need to leave now. And so he was not very happy. I guess he thought I had tricked him or something. And I was just sheepishly trying to figure out how to, like, because he just, I don't know why I guess somebody else maybe was supposed to show up to interview for that other job that day, and maybe he got us confused. Right. Maybe there's some reporter who ended up going on dates with Stephanie, but but like, what am I doing? But anyway, that was interesting. Yeah, so I spent a week reading all their files at the National Enquirer and learning kind of how that worked, which was cool because it informed that kind of paparazzi world. And it's not as seedy. They work in normal offices, but there is still a little bit of seediness. Right. So some of that kind of snooping and creeping in on people's lives and kind of trying to follow them around a little bit that the paparazzi do. I got a little taste of that, and which informed some characters in a screenplay I wrote shortly after there. So, you take what you can and try to learn from it.
There was I don't know if it was a show or a documentary, but it's about paparazzi types, and or maybe it was a Vice thing. But anyway, so they're meeting with a paparazzi guy like, somewhere in Hollywood, and they're so he's talking to them. He's sitting across from them, like in a little restaurant or cafe or something, and he's telling them about kind of what his job's like. And he goes, "Oh, hold on, someone's calling me." And so he's on the phone. And he goes, "Oh, really? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. So that's who it is? Oh my God, that's amazing." And so the camera's on him, and the phone, like it says "call dropped" because like there's a camera that's watching him, but he's still talking. He's still talking on the phone. Yeah. Okay. Great. No. Yeah. Some of the details. Yeah. He's still talking, and then he's you guys are not going to believe this, but I just got a tip. There's been a major, I don't know, an affair or something like that. It was an A-lister, someone huge, and anyway, I just got. But it's like now you're just showing off. Like now you're just trying to like.
Yeah, you're just BSing us now. Yeah. And maybe he got that call that morning, so he like reenacted the call.
Yeah. Does it have this when? Hey, just call me in the middle of this conversation. I'm gonna be in a meeting. 3 o'clock. Call me at 3:10.
Perfect timing. At 3:10 will be the perfect. I'll signal you.
Yeah.
I'll remove my hat, and that's a sign that you should call me from the next table.
This is so funny that the camera's still on him. It says call draft, but he's still talking like they're on someone's on the other line. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that there's some a little deception going on. In that,
yeah. I mean, like the whole point of that job was that I was going to distract the people.
Right.
And just by chatting with them, get them to talk about their lives and talk about what's going on with them, and in the hope that they'll say something that Rick and Stephanie can pick up on and use in their reporting.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad in a way that I didn't end up doing that job, even though at the time, like $200 cash, and going out to like every major event and getting access to all the major, like, that would have been really, really helpful to meet all those. That's actually would have been a great value for me, not the money. Like I would
Yeah.
have, I didn't really, I felt uncomfortable the idea of like because I didn't want to do anything illegal.
Right. Exactly.
But meeting all those people would have been great.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was yeah, interesting. An interesting time.
Mm.
And people are like, what you
Yeah.
but no, like but there's you know there's a lot of stuff that's fake. There's a lot of stuff that's faked, but
Yeah.
there's also stuff that's yeah, people they are snooping.
Yeah.
The people
Yeah.
in Hollywood are living under scrutiny, and I don't know if it's TMZ now or whatever, or if it's just the internet in general. But there's always someone trying to scoop the latest scandal, um, and back then it was much more. The tabloids were really kind of the main source for that stuff. They were much bigger
Yeah.
in those
Well, sorry,
days.
but that's actually pretty smart though, because it's like I could totally see, if you're at a fancy Hollywood party and Brad Pitt comes up to you and says like, "Hey man, you got a light?" And you're like, "Yeah, sure." And then you guys, especially if they've had a few drinks, and then you're like, "Hey, so what's going on with you?" And he's like, "Man,
Yeah.
I'm going through this divorce right now." And it's like,
Yeah. Right. All of a sudden, stupid, that dumb bitch, like you know, and you know who they're talking about, that bastard, blah blah blah, right? Like you
Yeah.
know who they're talking about because everyone knows who everyone's dating because they're celebrities, right? So all of a
Yeah.
sudden they're saying mean things about, you know, Brad's saying mean. Who was Brad dating back then? Wasn't it Gwyneth? You
Yeah, that's
know,
right. Yeah.
so you know, like so you just got some dirt.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
you can see how that would work. But another interesting thing that actually developed out of that is there was a guy so that whole thing evaporated. That whole Rick and Stephanie opportunity evaporated completely.
Yeah.
And anyway, this other guy who's peripherally connected to that asked me about it one time. He's like, "Hey, whatever happened with that thing down at with Rick and Stephanie?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, that fizzle. It was I told him the story, and he's like, "Oh well, we should talk." He said that I feel that's not right that it went sideways like that for you. Maybe we could figure something out. And so he said, let's meet up for coffee and talk about it. So I
Cool.
met up with him and he said, we'll meet at this it's a bar and cafe. It's more of a club at night, and during the day it's a bit like they have coffee and pastries and stuff.
Mhm.
We'll just so I'm okay. So I met with this guy, and it was this place in West Hollywood called the Abbey.
Mm.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Abbey, but it's I had no, I wasn't familiar with it at all, but it was a very well known gay bar.
Yep.
And so this guy, anyway, long story short, this guy, and again, another person that I have to be careful. I don't want to ruin anybody or poison anybody, or and maybe some people would find this offensive right now, this kind of a situation or an offer. I wasn't offended by it. I was like, okay, he's the guy. So the guy was making a play. He said, look, you're a nice young man and interesting to talk to, and I can open doors for you. I could put you in front. And he's like, I'm going tonight to a dinner party with Spielberg and Katzenberg and Geffen and all the major people are going to be there. It's going to be at one of their houses, I think, like in Malibu or Palisades or somewhere, or Beverly Hills. I don't know. But he's like, and I knew who this guy was.
Yeah.
And I knew he had access to those people. So he wasn't BSing me. This was real.
Yeah.
He was going to trot me out in front of every major person in Hollywood, all the big directors, producers, everybody.
Yeah.
If I'd be his boyfriend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not, I don't really swing that way. And he just looked at me dead in the eye and he said, use me for my contacts. Right. And and I was like, he's being honest.
Yeah.
Right. Like, is that sleazy or is that straight up front?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and okay, can we say what's the rating of this this show? Can we say R-rated things or PG things?
Oh yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, well, who's going to be doing the dick sucking here?
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
you're like how gay do I have to be?
Right.
It's like, because like, come on, like it was a big door opener, another door opener. Like a door had just closed, and I was like, no. And then all of a sudden he's like, here's another one. It's even better. And I was like, and I was like, and I said, I am flattered, thank you, like, but I can't. I don't, And I've thought of many thoughts over the years of like, what if I could, especially for the last decade or so, where sexuality is now all fluid, right? Could I have been? Maybe I could have figured out how to be gender fluid, but
yeah.
But like, come on, please, like, come on, I could do this. It's like, you're trying to get that acting job.
Yeah.
Like the role of your life.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I turned it down, and I said, but I was trying to be gracious about it. I said, thank you, I appreciate the offer, that was very nice of you. Right.
Yeah.
A lot of people would be like, no, that was very sleazy of that person.
Well, I mean, if you ever need a proof of like the difference between men and women, it's just like, for guys, it's like, yeah, I appreciate it, but no thanks. But it's not like you're writing like this expose and now you're a victim, and it's just like where it's like,
that's what people do now. They're like, I was victimized by so and so, and I'm like, no, they made a pass.
Exactly.
This guy made a pass at me and said, look, I can do a lot of good for you, but and I like,
yeah.
And and I mean, I was already an actor, so that's like halfway to horror, right? So
right.
Right? Like in the old days, didn't have signs like no actors or prostitutes.
Right.
Right. Like we've only been semi-respectable for not that long, right?
Right.
No, I am just kidding. But there is a little bit of like, I'll be whatever you want me to be, baby. Like that's your job as an actor. Is like, I'll be this tomorrow, I'll be that tomorrow. So who do you want me to be? What? How much are you paying? But yeah, so I turned down another door opener type scenario. So yeah, I'm trying to think.
I used to do lots of things.